Hello, and you're listening to So You Want to Start a Business podcast, and I am your host, Ingrid Thompson. My guest today is Sharon Kitroser, and she's known as Kat. Sharon and her business partner and long-term friend, Amy Mauser, are known as Team Kat and Mouse, for the obvious reasons. Their methodology is completely changing the way organisations approach fundraising. This is a fascinating conversation with Sharon, and everything she says applies to every business, no matter what business you are in. This is not just about philanthropy and fundraising. Hello, and thanks for being here, for spending your precious time with me and my guests. Business, and especially the financial side of business, has become overcomplicated, and I am here to simplify it. My business is healthynumbers.com.au, and I am on a mission to help every business owner understand how money works in their business, because I believe everyone deserves to be financially savvy, and especially when it comes to understanding how money works in business. In this podcast, we meet business owners and we delve into their wisdom, their lessons learned, to debunk common business myths and give you tangible, tactical tools and tips for you to build and grow your own business. My mission is to help small business owners find lasting financial safety, which is why I wrote the book, So You Want to Start a Business, the same name as this podcast. This book helps you understand business fundamentals and find your own level of financial safety through business. This book is the only advertising on the podcast, along with my guests, and pretty much every day someone somewhere in the world buys a copy. So thank you if you've bought a copy for yourself or for a friend or a colleague. To find a copy of So You Want to Start a Business, the book, head to your local independent bookseller. We love the independents, or wherever you buy your books online. Okay, enough of the advertising. Let's get straight into the conversation with Sharon Kitroser. Hello, and here we are today with Sharon Kitroser. Sharon, hello. How are you?
I'm great. So glad to be with you.
So great to have you here. And Sharon and I actually have been chatting, so we thought we'd better get into the actual conversation for everybody and not just chat amongst ourselves. Sharon, my first question is, where in the world are you right now?
Although I grew up in New York, so before anyone says that does not sound like a Florida accent, that is correct. I was born and bred in New York City, but have spent the last 25 years in South Florida, in Palm Beach County in particular.
Oh, so lovely. I grew up in Queensland, which we were discussing, in Queensland and Florida are a bit the same, all that lovely tropical and that sort of lifestyle. And yeah. All right, let's get into business. How do you describe your business? What is your business?
We are truly nonprofit consultants, but what makes us a little different, to really drill down a bit, is that we assume if you've invited us in, you know your mission and your vision, and you're running your organization, you just want to raise more funds. So we're very, let's teach, let's coach, let's work with your staff so they're very professional and well-skilled fundraisers.
So you're really focusing on that side of the business for businesses that call themselves nonprofits. So when did you start this business?
We started it, we've been thinking about it for a while, because as you know, one of my very dearest friends and former boss is my partner. We've been talking about this for a long time because we have some serious beliefs on the lack of training within the nonprofit space. You hire people, you send them out to the world to ask for money without any instruction, and they come back beaten and bruised. And the average fundraiser, at least in the United States, stays 14 to 16 months, a lot of turnover. So we've tried, when we work together at an organization, and then when we work at different organizations, we tried these training methods and found out that they worked. So we started thinking about it a long time ago, but actually went into business shortly after the first of the year.
So this year in 2021. Fabulous. Yes. And I love what your business is called, Kat and Mouse, Kat spelt K-A-T. And I'm a cat person, so of course that was, why is it called that?
That is one of the greatest questions that people ask us. So far, of all the people we have worked with, only one has figured it out. So my name is Kitroser and Amy's is Mauser. And so Kat and Mouse were our husband's nicknames when they were children. the really important word, and it also discusses the chase in fundraising, which is what most people think it is. The other thing it's very, very important is the word team, because we very much focus on bringing in associates that we need, so we may go to a nonprofit who needs some help in marketing. Well, I spent the first career in, working in marketing, and we have people who come in who freelance for us, who are experts at social media, at marketing, at writing, at public relations, because we want to really coach people on what we're very best at and where we can really give them superior training, as opposed to saying, I spent a lot of years in advertising. I can talk the talk pretty well. However, I left, over 10 years ago. And every day in the world of advertising, there are changes. So we bring the most up-to-date people in on projects as needed.
Yeah, it's so good. And you're right. It's team Kat and Mouse, not just Cat and Mouse. Thank you. So why did you start the business? Now, one of the reasons that we're talking to you for this podcast is that you are actually a partnership, and it's super important to understand that a good partnership, well structured, well set up, can work. So why were you and Amy keen to start this business? And you've touched on that, the fact that, people get burnt out 14, 16 months, they go out and get bruised and battered, and, the fundraising is so important. But what was underpinning, like, the real reason for wanting to get going in your own business for you?
Well, for me, it was watching what happened during 2020 in the United States and elsewhere with the lockdowns, and people going, what do we do now? Especially those who solely fundraise through events. It's hard to have a 5K or a gala in the middle of a pandemic. And there were organizations, at least in the United States, who went away because they just weren't nimble enough to pivot and change the way they did it. But why Amy and why now is really an interesting, I've always been very clear on what I'm very best at. I'm also a person who's very clear, because I don't see how you learn otherwise, on what I don't know, and what I'm not very best at. I'm very fortunate with Amy, and when we work together, we realize this. What I'm very best at is not what she's very best at. And the same is true the other way. I am the partner that will run into the fire and then run back out for the fire extinguisher and say, let's go, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's start today. And Amy is a little bit more process oriented. What comes first? What comes second? What comes third? But the real key to all this is respect. And I respect Amy's opinion. Amy respects my opinion. Her cautiousness keeps us from, maybe burning on reentry, and my energy and, new business development background keep us, keeping on and moving forward with our business. We also have a third person who's part of the team who's very methodical. And so you put these three personalities together and you add in respect, and, you get something really extraordinary. And we trust each other, all three of us. And Amy and I are good personal friends. So we trust easily, we forgive easily, we brainstorm easily, all those things. And brainstorming is a lot more efficient when you're not looking at it in the same place. You really don't want a partner who won't grow you while you grow them.
Yeah, that's such a great answer. And it's so important, all those different factors coming together, that makes this a fantastic partnership. Now, one of my favorite questions is to ask, when did the business feel real? And given that you're still in the early days of your business, maybe maybe it hasn't yet felt real, but has there been a moment in this last, because we're talking in September and, you're not even quite a year old. Have there been moments when you've kind of felt the reality of being in business?
There are two parts to that. When we, a friend of ours, a friend of mine, who is the person we bring in for graphics, designed our logo. And, everybody, thank you to PowerPoint and Canva, thinks they're an artist. I'm not. And so when I saw our logo and then our website, it was so exciting. But really that moment, we got our first payment. And we really worked hard for this client who now is very free to tell other people to work with us because it was such a good experience. But it was just confirmation that what we wanted to do and how we envisioned this could work. And, you know, our biggest challenge also is staying, and this is really good advice, is to not go. We've gotten people who want to hire us for things, you know, my expertise in marketing or Amy's expertise, and we need to stay on mission. We created a really clear vision for our business, and once people like us, they want us to do things that we're not the very best at, or, you know, not what we envisioned being able to develop in outcomes for them.
Yeah, it's such a, you know, and it's not just the bright, shiny object that we're talking about there. What we're actually talking about is that, you know, when you get to a stage in your career, in your, you know, the work that you've done over, you know, 20, 30, 40 years, that you actually have a range of skills that you could do, but you're being really super clear in this business that this is what you do. And yes, you could do this to help and you could do that, but you're staying super clear. And I think you're right. That is such an important point for people to get really early on, is just, and stay in your aisle, stay in your lane, eyes forward, not right and left, because you will be tempted to do more because clients want it. But having those partners is so important. So let's talk about those early customers. How have you been getting customers? Because this is the number one thing. When you're working with something that is a service, when you're describing what you do and you're going out and getting customers who, you know, and you're working with customers who don't have a lot of money to start with. So for them to spend money, how have you approached the search for new customers for this business?
Well, I have a little slight advantage to many, which is my background, and my first career was in new business development. So you talk about what I'm very best at. I am a new business development animal. I you know, there's some things that go into when I teach new business development is I have a great ability to not take a no personally, because if you don't know me, you cannot like me. So, okay. And I have a great ability for that. And I sat in on a few seminars, consultants for consultants, and they all said, don't be embarrassed to sell yourself. So I stopped listening to them and said, okay, so what do I need to do? Well, in the consultant world, you have to prove that you are smart. So a great way to do that is through podcasts and blogs and sharing on LinkedIn and other sites. And groups within LinkedIn, is setting out intro letters. We send out newsletters, but they're always, my belief is, if you'll spend, 60 seconds on my newsletter, I better deliver, because maybe next time you'll spend 65 seconds with it. And so I've also, this has been kind of my aha of the last 8 months, is we've also, I've also connected with a lot of consultants whose services come before mine. So we've gotten recommended by those ones who sit and do leadership, which I totally think is great. It's just not our business, but who'll do leadership, who will do vision, mission, work with the boards. And what their biggest frustration often is I come in and teach you and train you, and then you go back to your old ways the minute I leave. Okay, that's when you want to bring us in. We'll refine the how to take that mission and vision to the street to raise funds for your mission. So, I have a joke, because thank you to COVID, Amy works out of her home office. I work out of my home office, and our colleague Ben works in St. Louis, in his own office. And so we work, I say I have a morning meeting every day asking myself, what can I do different and better? So I think that's a really important part too. I have one little fable that I tell everyone, so please excuse that, it has nothing to do with my business. Long, long, long ago, I had a nanny who, picked up the kids from school and such. And she said to me, I also had a puppy yellow lab, very important to the story. She was better with the dog than she was great with the kids. She's great. She trained my dog. I'm like, Robin, how do you know how to train a dog? Well, my parents owned a kennel and training facility outside of Massachusetts, outside of Boston in Massachusetts. Great. So my kids grew up. It was time to say goodbye to her. And she said, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a dog training business because I'm a very good dog trainer, as you know. So everybody's been telling me I'm going to get a lot of business. And I go, that's really good that you're a very good dog trainer. How will anyone know? And she looked at me like I had 6 heads. How will anyone know? And she came back the next day and she said, okay, I need your help. Mm-hmm. So we came up with ideas of gift baskets for vets and emails and social media and a logo and all this stuff. So, you could be the very best consultant. And if no one knows, if you could make the very best cookies, and if no one knows, then you're just going to be eating a lot of leftover cookies. So someone has to know. And the other thing is there's this book I read 100 lifetimes ago called The E-Myth as an Entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
And I have built the business a lot on that and tried to keep, I work at the business and I work in the business, and I try to keep them a little bit separate because you have to do your bookkeeping. We have to go see our accountant. We have to do all this, but I have to work at the business, growing the business, sharing the story of the business, talking to new people. And then you also, when you start a business, have to have a discussion with your partner on who's very best at what. I will never be very best at putting little numbers in little columns. I move too fast. I'm too hyper. It's not my thing.
Yeah.
Amy will never be very best at calling strangers.
Yes.
She talks about the hunter versus the farmer.
Yes.
So I'm very much the hunter. She's very much the farmer. And so, so you have to work in the business, at the business. You have to figure out if you, hone your skills to be the very best cookie baker or the very best dog trainer or the very best nonprofit consultant, but then tell somebody and then have them tell somebody.
Yeah. And, I think, Sharon, you're really touching on one of the most important parts of getting into business. And that is the idea of having someone who can do new business development, who can tell. How do you tell someone? How do you let someone know that they're doing that? Because, so many people are the best at what they do. They're so good at what they teach Pilates, or they they bake cookies, or, they're making beautiful environmental products that are just sensational to save, various parts of the planet and what they're doing. But if people don't know that, and that's the thing that very few people actually teach. And so my understanding of what you do with Team Kat Mouse is that you help the not-for-profits tell someone and let people know what they're doing so that people can feel that they want to actually contribute to the ongoing of the not-profit. Is that in essence what you're doing?
We
in the business?
Teach also traditional fundraising, but in the very beginning, we definitely teach new business development. So if I were to give the people who listen and watch your podcast the best bit of advice, it would be to go on a diet. What? And the diet is, and I often call it making an appointment with yourself. So you have to do new business development, whether you like it or not. And you have to get good at it, or at least do more of it, play the closing ratio, as what somebody once said to me, even a blind squirrel occasionally finds a nut. So if you're not good at it, you got to do more of it till you get good at it.
Yes.
Here's the thing. You set goals for yourself every week. This week, I'm going to reach out to 25 new people. And I'm going to do that next week and the week after. And I'm going to see how many of those turn into business for my business. And I'm going to do little check marks or whatever I do to measure myself. And I'm going to create a roadmap to build my business. I do this with fundraisers all the time. Sometimes I explain to them why. I have one famous story where a fundraiser made the mistake of telling my boss, who at the time was Amy, that she had no appointments for the whole week. And I said, you're going to start making 25 calls a day, and you're going to tell me who you called, not who you're thinking about calling. I don't believe in this. I think that's all shut up to your manager. Tell me who you called. The next week, she did it again. And the third week, she calls me and goes, Sharon, I got to talk to you. I got too much to do. I can't call 25 people a day. And I start to laugh. I said, okay, you've earned the explanation now.
That reminds me of somebody that I know who really focused on marketing and did something very much like that. And she said, this marketing has to stop. I've got clients coming out of my yin yang. It's just, it's like when you actually do it, and she didn't have to do it for very long. It just, it's like you said, it's just set the goal and do it. So there you go. That is gold right there. Let's talk about money, because that's one of my favorite subjects, is how, you said that you had a client who's the first client that paid you. How did you go about figuring out how much to charge for this and how to make this financially viable? Because you both had like real jobs where you were paid a regular paycheck, and you've set that aside and you've gone into this on your own. How do you price this nebulous concept of yours that is, like, how do you know how much to charge? You don't need to talk to us about the actual dollars, but like, what's the thinking for you and Amy as you get together and you go, how do we price this? How do we make it viable for us?
So there are pretty much 3 ways that consultants charge. A retainer, pay me X amount per month, and I will be there to do, and these are the tasks that we intend on doing. There is hourly, this is what I charge an hour. How many hours would you like? And then per project. Our first client was per project because they had a very lofty goal on a specific giving day.
Yeah.
It is a small organization that has no fundraising staff. So in the course of a week, we raised some $30,000 through this giving day. He thinks we hung the moon. And it was a lot of social media and my art projects on Canva. I can't even say it was but compared to what they had, it was fantastic. So he is because we doubled. He wanted to raise 15,000. We raised 30,000. And so,
wow, congratulations. Sorry. Can we just say congratulations right there? If the target was 15 and then, for a giving day, you got 30, that's 100% more than what he wanted. So, that is congratulations.
Thank you. And it was just asking, what do you want to see happen? And we're very big, especially Amy, on asking good questions. So, because, under promise, over deliver.
Yeah.
We took apart what we needed to do, how many donors we needed to get. It's really funny. After I told you I don't like putting little numbers in columns, I am a closing ratio lunatic. Like, I want to know how many calls I need. I think it takes the emotion out of the sale of it all, is understanding how many calls you have to make to get, I wasn't joking. When you're doing business development, you need to measure yourself so you know how many you need to make to perform this way. And of course it'll veer a little bit. My sales background has been very, very, and new business development background, same thing, has been very helpful in fundraising. There were people, at least that I've dealt with, who will go 12 rounds with you on that sales is different than fundraising. I maintain they're just wrong. And there are people who don't understand what professional salespeople do. They're thinking of the guy they bought their car from, who sold them, a cheap insurance policy. They're not thinking of a professional salesperson, especially those who sold intangibles. Those are the ones.
That makes so much sense that it really is the same thing. Yeah.
I will go, I get great joy about doing sales training for fundraisers, because when you get them to know how to measure, how to figure closing ratios, what their average donation is, it takes, when I was in my first career, I had a lot of very, very young salespeople under me, who were very worried about being liked. And when they didn't get an order, would get very emotional, crying. And, I had multiple boxes of tissues in my office. And it was, except fundraisers are the same. They take the mission so very personally, really want to succeed. And I'd rather give them a system that keeps them off the roller coaster. The roller coaster of closing, not closing, can really support that 14-month longevity, because you get tired of the up and down and you go, why would someone do this for a living? You really do get there.
Yeah, yeah. And you can honestly think, if I think about people that I've known who really believe in causes, that absolutely believe in the mission. And when people say no and people say no, it erodes that. So that roller coaster is exactly what you're talking about. And the same applies to somebody starting a business. They care so much about what they want to do, and they can't understand why people don't immediately sign up for everything they're offering, because they know that what they're going to do is so good. But everybody doesn't want what you're offering, and everybody can't. There's, like you said, there's a closing ratio, there's the average donations, all of that. And for someone who's not a numbers person, doesn't want to put numbers in little boxes, but you can't do it without the numbers, can you? You have to know what the numbers are. Can I ask you? Go on.
The girl who I made make the 25 calls a day said to me, "Do you do that?" And I said, "I don't have to anymore." That's the funny thing is, I know, every time I get a no, it pushes me to get a yes. Like, I know you have to get through so many no's to get it. So I've been doing this so long that I just know. By the way, that young lady is now a chief development officer for the Girl Scouts. So she has done those 25. She's come a long way since those 25.
Long way since that.
And it wasn't that long ago, probably 5 years ago.
It's amazing how, and I think, one of the things that I would imagine, and I know that it's certainly something I've observed over the years, is that as you ask the questions and as you make those calls, that you hone the conversation and you get better and better at it. I remember I was doing some accounting numbers work for a business, and I was listening to a young chap making calls to tattoo parlors to ask for a particular, it was a merchandise company, and he had this list of tattoo parlors, and I listened to him over an hour or two making one call after another, and it was really fascinating to listen to how his conversation changed ever so slightly. Each time he called, he opened with a slightly different line, and he got closer and closer to the yes with each time he made the call. And of course then the momentum built as well. And even though he got a lot of no's, you could hear the momentum and the confidence building, because he felt more confident about what he was actually saying. It was fascinating.
So I also say, here's another, there's lesson number 2 is, I don't believe in making salespeople or fundraisers dependent on me going on calls with them, because it eventually crushes them and thinks they can't do it themselves. So I would do what I lovingly call the postmortem. After you've gone on a call, come in my office, tell me how it went. And I'd make them sit there with a pen. And when they said something that was very effective, like your tattoo caller guy, write that down. If you said something so that you never want to say again, it just came out wrong, don't write that down. Because by writing it down, it ingrains it in your brain. And, I've tried a lot. My favorite line that everyone who knows me knows is always, how do we best engage? It's such a powerful question, is how do we best engage? How does this sound? Now that you know what I do, how do you think we best engage? And then stop talking. It's another salesperson problem. Shut up. Answer.
Just stop talking.
Please stop talking. When I was baby in sales, I wrote that on, we used to have like yellow pads and a pen, and I'd write SUS on the top of it, and no one knew what it was. And it was to remind me to shut up, Sharon.
Just stop talking. That's so funny. Oh dear. Look, let's keep this moving along. The way your pricing is around the projects rather than the retainer and the hourly.
No, we do all 3.
You do all 3. So that is the 3 different ways that you do it. I think that applies to pretty much any business, really. You can do something that's hourly, or you can do something that's retainer, or you can do something that's project. And, because one of the things I love is that whole thing about money and pricing and how we set ourselves, is that you can look at pretty much any business and you can apply those 3 to pretty much any sort of business. Okay, let's have some reflective questions. And I know it's early days in your business. Having said that, you are bringing such a wealth of experience and, what you've done in the past to this. Is there already something that you would have done differently in the time, like from when you and Amy started? Is there anything that you might have done differently in the business?
I think it's kind of early to answer that. We're going
Yes.
through a big redo of our website right now for
Okay.
SEO. I wish that's definitely a wish. I wish I had started day one with understanding what people search, but that's kind of a technical thing. I never think I speak to enough new people every day because I'm hard on myself.
Yeah.
But no, I also, a lot of the stuff that I wish we could have done differently, like some local and regional networking. I'm going since March of 2020, going to my first in-person networking event on October 5th.
Right. So but that's circumstantial. That's not about your
No.
control of that. That's, so once you're allowed to be out and about amongst people,
Yes.
you will be out there. I can imagine, Sharon.
I like people.
Yeah, I reckon. So it's tough being in business. I use that word. Not everybody uses the word tough. But business has its challenges, it's difficult, and you're dealing with that idea of people wanting to be liked. And I think that is probably one of the things that makes things. But for you personally, what do you find difficult or tough, and how do you get past that? Like, how do you just get on?
That's such a good question. So working by myself in the house. When I worked for the Walt Disney Company, I worked out of my house for 8.5 years. This time it's different because it feels less of a choice and more of a, so some days if it's raining, you don't feel like calling new people. And it's back to being self-coach. What would I often think, what would I tell me? Well, just go ahead and tell yourself to get over yourself and make some more calls. It's self-coaching, but I think it's incumbent on everyone, because figure out what it takes to be successful. It doesn't mean you're going to be excited about it, doing it every day, especially when it comes to new business development, because you want to feel your best and be your best. And some days you just have to power through and be the best you can be at that moment.
Yeah, and you, that whole working from home, being in the house, and depending on what else is happening around you, who else is in the house, and what's going on, and the weather outside, you're absolutely, and what you've been allowed to do. Can you go to a yoga class? Can you go out for a walk? All of those kinds of things. Yeah. What would I tell me? I love that. That's so good. That's what I would put at the top of my yellow pad. What would I tell me? Sharon, I'm going to ask you one more question and then we'll wrap this up. So there's you and Amy, and I think you said Dan and Ben. Have you outsourced, and you've got this team of other people? Are there other outsourced things that you've done? Have you kind of got other people to help you with things along the way? Like, what role does that play in business?
We have an accountant, because back to stage one, I don't like putting numbers in there. And that's been the most at this point. I love jobbing out business, because my dream, because it's sort of my dream for every nonprofit staff, have a group of people who's very best at one thing but works very well with the others.
Yeah.
I know a lot about marketing and advertising, but I'm no longer the very best. I've been out of it too long.
Yes.
My PR person is fantastic. And once in a while, for one client, we got everybody in the same room, except Ben, because he's in St. Louis. And I want them to offer each other. I want them all to go, wait, no, that's a better project for the PR person writing that brochure, because she writes better in short form. I'll just design it. And that's the kinds of conversations that get me excited, because in a world where people spend their time doing what they're very best at and working with people and respecting others, that they're better than you at something. I always said, my key last thought is, if you hire people that are smarter than you, you get to go home at time. Now I'm home, but that was always that was always my goal when I was in the radio business, was to hire people that were better than me and then coach them to the next step, to level up and have them do what they're very best at and do more of it. And most bosses get intimidated by that. I just had little kids and wanted to get home on time. And if you're holding hands on everything, they don't become powerful. And you want to build your people so that they're powerful. You're still the leader, but you're leading a group of A players, which lets you go home on. I just think especially in the nonprofit world, because you're not paid enough to work 17-hour days and the passion sometimes takes over and you do things you just need to go home. You need to recharge your own battery. There was a lot of burnout during COVID because hours of work got lost. I am one of those people, where you just worked until the job was done because you didn't go home, you were home.
Yeah. There isn't that distinction. And if you haven't built something in between to say, this is, you take this blouse off and you put something else on and that says, I'm not at work anymore. It just blends in, doesn't it? Totally does. I absolutely love that. Sharon, half the audience is in the US and the other half is spread around the world. Do you work around the world or are you exclusively to the US?
Some of the stuff translates wherever. Good sales training for fundraisers translates everywhere. We have somebody we're working with, oddly enough, in Israel, talk about some tough time difference. And we are working with someone in the UK who we love.
Australia's a good time zone for you because our morning is your afternoon. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's not awful.
No, and you know what? We're happy to work with. I mean, I think some of the laws having to do with fundraisers are probably different in different places. However, good sales skill for fundraisers, good new business development skills, those are universal. Being able to figure out your closing ratio, which is one of my most favorite things to teach, is universal everywhere. How to write a strong letter that, I'm very big on intro notes because it's an email world, it's a text world. It has to be short, concise, and explain what's in it for them. All those things translate beautifully no matter where you are. So we would love, and then we'd only like to we'd like to work with people in places we want to go. So Australia would be great. And
all righty. So Sharon, tell us how the best way for people to get in contact with you.
I think the easiest way is through email, which is Sharon@teamkatandmouse.com. And it's K, as you said, teamkatandmouse.com. And, not only am I available, but Amy and Ben and definitely actually our graphic artist also translates into every place else. And most importantly, we're really fun to work with. We're all very happy people. And I always say, surround yourself with happy people. It keeps you happy.
It certainly does. And I know you're big on LinkedIn because you mentioned
big
that
on
earlier.
LinkedIn,
and so, we'll definitely have all of this will be in the show notes. So your parting word, you did say the thing you'd like to leave people with would be hire someone smarter and you get to go home on time. But Sharon, you get to have the last word today. So what would you leave us with as we close out the interview?
Don't lose faith. If you can make it work during these crazy days around the world, you can make it work, and never, ever take no personally. Because every no gets you closer to a yes. And if, you are not the no, they're not rejecting you because they don't know you. By the way, same advice I give my son when he's dating girls. They don't know you yet. Don't take it personally.
Don't take it personally. I think that's wonderful, a wonderful way to leave it with. So thank you. Thank you so much, Sharon. It's been a delightful conversation.
Thank you.
Never take no personally. As she says, you are not the no. Thank you, Sharon, for such a terrific conversation. And I love there that she says, never lose faith. Don't lose faith and just don't take that no personally. What's your standout from this conversation with Sharon? Of course, one of my standouts is her attention to numbers and to data. It's funny, she says, I'm a closing ratio lunatic. And she said this because this helps you to know how many calls you need to make. And she pays super attention to the average donation amount. So fundraising equals sales. And again, that idea of don't take no personally, it's not about being liked. I love that she explained about setting the goals weekly and that doing more of whatever you're doing until you get good at it. Such a terrific question. She asks, what can I do differently or better today? So no matter what business you are in, all of what Sharon talks about is relevant for you. One of my favorite things, she says that she is super clear about what she is the very best at. And she says this a few times, and love that she says, hire people who are smarter than you, who are better than you, and you get to go home on time. Honestly, when we pursue business and entrepreneurship based on core values and deepest integrity, at the same time build a financially successful business, we live richer, fuller lives. I'm your host, Ingrid Thompson. This is the So You Want to Start a Business podcast. I'm the author of the book, the same name, So You Want to Start a Business. And as I always ask as we close the show, what action are you inspired to take today? Till the next time, thanks for listening.